Hi, Karen. Welcome to our tonight's podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. As I was just fangirling you before we get started, Karen was cousin Hilary from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I was sharing with her that I grew up watching her in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, dub in Spanish, because you
Yeah.
gotta love this. It's in Puerto Rico. And when I share with my friends who are all around the same age, we're in their 40s, I was like, hey, I got this pitch for Karyn Parsons to come on the show. And you're like, oh my gosh, you need to talk to her. So you have raised a generation, even though you were just a few years older than us. So
Thanks. Sweet. That's so great to hear. It'll amaze me every time.
go for it. Let's talk about what you've been up to since, because you actually have built an author career on writing historical fiction, particularly Black communities in the US for young adult, middle grade, like a younger audience, but at the same time, adults can read too, and they can learn so much more about like our own history.
And that's been one of the real perks about doing it is when I started, I started a nonprofit organization called Sweet Blackberry. And the mission is to bring little known stories of Black achievement to kids. So you talk about great people and things you don't hear about so much in school and stuff. And it was geared toward really little kids, these picture books, these short animated films that I wrote. But I found out very quickly that the older siblings and the parents and the teachers were all leaning in because they didn't know these stories and they were fascinated by the stories and the people and these. I mean, the stories are really kind of out there. They were people that really fought against all odds and did tremendous things under great pressure and under circumstances that where everything was against them. And so they're kind of like these great adventures or like fairy tales. And I always say I wanted to make Sweet Blackberry telling fairy tales to kids because I love fairy tales, but I hated history.
Yeah.
But it was fairy tales. You knew everything there was about Little Red Riding Hood. Like you knew the whole thing and you were really engaged. So why not tell these stories to kids? Plant seeds. You're not going to tell them every little thing, but plant the seeds early, engage them, meet them where they are, where it's relevant to them. And as they get older, they can learn more about it, but at least they know a little about the landscape of people who've done incredible things along the way, people that look like them, people that look like their neighbor, and they recognize the value of all people in the whole community. Because these are one thing I'll also drive home is they get relegated to being Black history and all of that. But and while they're also just American history.
Yes. It really is American history. I hate to say this, but it is American history. We
We're
kind of have to
history.
look at everything. A lot of
Yes.
times a lot of the conversation right now, and where we are in a very tenuous time, is that we're looking at Germany. And I'm like, no, actually, just look at American history for a lot of our signs because it's been written. That's how they got the playbook. Our history that we don't want to teach. And I think it works like yours. It's like teaching what's matter. This is our history, good or bad. It is our history.
Exactly. And shouldn't we all just know and understand all of it? Don't we all want all of our kids to understand growing up? Like, why would we ban books? Why would we whitewash history? Why would we hide anything from our children? We want them to know and understand and do better as they go into the world, right? So let's just show it all to them and let them figure it out, make decisions accordingly. Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, that led to that. They can learn from it. So that's my big thing with Sweet Blackberry. And even with my books, which are historical fiction, they've turned into, which is, I don't know how, like I said before, I don't know how I got here. But what I really want to do is be truthful. I
Yeah.
just want to be as truthful as possible. And if I can bring a story and bring history to people in the most truthful way that I can, then people can see it and have a better understanding of what it may have been like, what this was like for the people at that time, maybe all these different facets of a situation, not as simple cut and dry as we like to make things. I think all those things help us. We're all humans. People make mistakes, people misstep, people stay quiet, all sorts of things. I think if we see that, especially in literature and narrative and storytelling, it gives people the opportunity to understand and have that empathy for the people in the situations and recognize themselves, all sides of themselves, good, bad, complicit. It makes you recognize a lot and go, oh, I'm kind of capable of doing that same thing or whatever it is. And hopefully we can all do better.
Yeah. It's so telling. I actually love Blue Beach because it's set 100 years ago. Yeah. it's very reminiscent in many ways of where we are. Like history repeats itself. I heard about this beach particularly in the 2020 reckoning when we were actually, everyone was like, we're going to be better, we're going to do much better. And we started looking at our history and like what happened. And so talks about the beach because it's a YA, it's a murder mystery. There is a conversation about race, there's a conversation about dynamics. There's a conversation about segregation, and it's very telling that in 2026 we're revisiting the past in many ways, unfortunately. And people like us, we're fighting and educating others and trying to provide like critical thinking and doing what we can in a situation that we can feel very powerless. But I think we have to look back at our history and say they had it, they went through it.
Yes.
We can go through it.
People have gone through these same things. A friend of mine brought Bruce's beach, the beach that this was modeled after in a way, or is what it was inspired by, is what I should say. It was the beach that inspired this. A friend of mine told me about Bruce's beach in Manhattan Beach and how it was an all black beach. And it was difficult to have this thing. But then eventually the city ended up kind of wrangling it from them and telling them they needed it. And they ended up holding it after taking it from them and not doing anything with it. And it is a long, horrible story because they eventually ended up getting it back, but then they ended up having to sell again. And it was just, to me, a really tragic situation. And it was so unfortunate. You're talking about people who just want recreational space, who just want to swim in the ocean.
Yeah.
You know what? Oh, we can't all swim in I grew up in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
They actually, the beach, the location of Blue Beach is exactly, and I don't know if you saw in the author's note, the beach I grew up swimming in had been a black beach as well up into the 60s. And I had no idea. I don't think my mom had any idea. So it was a totally integrated beach when I grew up in it.
Yeah.
But only a little while before had it stopped being an all black beach. And so it had this history and I didn't know. And I completely grew up in my whole life thinking that everyone always got to swim in the water, in the ocean. I didn't think about segregation in terms of ocean, like spaces, parks and mountains and people hiking and being able to just love nature and be outdoors and enjoy the earth. You think of these spaces like schools and stores, shops and things like that, restaurants, but you just think that even outdoor recreational space, people were saying, no, not you. You can't come over here. Very simple things. And so it meant a lot to me to kind of, when my friend told me about it, it stuck in my head and I read about it. And I just really wanted to go into what it could have been like to possibly live in a situation like that and the bravery that it took to just endure the day-to-day disdain you got from people around you and the dislike and to people that are supposed to be your neighbors but actually just don't want you there, and people who are not approving of you holding this space and having to kind of push up against that, and then being that close, so close to danger as well. And that's how this book starts, with this kind of dangerous situation that shows itself.
Yeah. And I am right now, I'm from Puerto Rico and my family lives there. And right now we're having the billionaires actually taking our beaches. And the more I think about it, it's the same idea. Locals can enjoy the basic land that they have. We've been displaced from our own island. And it's the same, but it's like it repeats itself in different ways. It repeats in colonialism. It repeats itself in capitalism. It repeats itself in racism. Like all the isms are repeating, and they're all there in different ways. So community, this was not just a Black issue. This is a Hawaiian issue. It's
Absolutely.
it's
Power, right? It's power. It's
Yeah.
where people are exercising their power. And if it's a dominant race over the society at the time, that's the power. If it's money, that's the power. It becomes this whole, and it just, like you said, here we are. It hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed, unfortunately, but we can fight. And I think
Don't stop fighting it.
And the first thing we can do is learn from our history, learn from what ancestors did, what our previous generations have fought, how we can actually exercise that. So talks about the elevator pitch for Blue Beach for listeners who are not familiar with the story, want to buy the book. It is YA, but I think adults can enjoy it too. So it talks about that.
So Blue Beach takes place in 1929, and it takes place in the top of the summer. So this is before the market crash, which will happen later in the fall. This is it's just before summer. They're celebrating the parade, signifying the beginning of summer in this little town. And there's an all black beach called Blue Beach, and our protagonist Blue, her parents own the beach. But early on in the story, I should say, we find the beloved white debutante of the town, Dottie, is found washed up on the shore of Blue Beach, of the Black Beach. And when Blue and the boy that she likes, Ben, find her body, I mean, they're devastated. They know this person, but they also are fearful of what will happen to the Black people of the town, the whole Black community, how they will be directly affected by this, how they'll be blamed for this, and they make a decision that's kind of a bold, frightening, not completely thought out, but then what do you do? Decision to swim the body out in a direction and hope it'll wash up on one of the other white beaches.
Yeah.
And from there, it kind of sets in motion because her body does eventually wash up, but it starts to add, there are a lot of questions are being asked about Ben in particular, because he had a relationship that we learn more about with Dottie. Yeah, so I don't want to say too.
Yeah, it's a perfect setup. It's a lot about relationships, it's a lot about race conversations, but also about like just the conversation about Blue coming to her own and trying to, in her way, saving the community at the same time, realizing that a set of events that are bigger than her have unfolded and that she cannot control it. She's powerless.
She also recognizes the colorism that
Yeah.
goes on with her family in particular, close to this, having this kind of colorism that's existed and been accepted. And that was something I wanted to talk about. I wanted to have in the story as well, because I recognized that growing up. I'm biracial, but I remember growing up in Southern California and hanging out in this one area, and I kept meeting all the Black, it was a Black community, and it was a pretty upper middle class, some upper well-to-do people in this community, but everybody was light skinned, but they weren't mixed. Their parents were all light skinned, and their parents were light skinned. And it's something that had just been, it was a thing that you did. And it's true that there was really this standard of not being darker than a brown paper bag. There was the whole paper bag test that people would do, where they held up a paper bag to people. If you were darker than a paper bag, you weren't admitted to certain parties and things like this. I mean, it was a really terrible when you look at it, and it's so obvious to us that it's an atrocity that people would do things like this, but it was just like a thing people did, and they could have laughed about it, and it was accepted. It wasn't, not that it wasn't frowned upon, but it just wasn't taken as seriously as today. If somebody tried to pull something like that, I think everyone would raise hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then you have other books about the Black Panthers in the 1970s.
Yes.
That's a middle class.
And Clouds Over California takes place in the 1970s. And the protagonist in that, one, there were a lot of things that pulled from my childhood in that one. But the older cousin, a liberated woman during the women's liberation movement time. And she's a young Black girl. And she shows up at the house with all this attitude and no bra. She shows up and she's like Black power, girl power. And she ends up introducing Stevie, the protagonist of that book, to the Black Panthers, but in a whole different, I wanted to bring them in a whole different way than they came to me as a kid, because they were completely vilified to me when I was a kid. I thought they were bad, troublemaking guys with afros and rifles. I thought they were bad. And that's what the propaganda was. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the breakfast programs that the elementary schools across the world adopted from the Black Panthers, they were actually taking things into their own hands and feeding their communities and protecting their communities. That was the idea. But then the media put this dark light onto it. So it had a whole other sinister vibe. But the truth was, they were like, look, you're not taking care of the Black community. So we're going to do it. We're going to kids. We're going to protect our neighborhood so you don't come in here harassing people. It was just basically saying, don't worry, we got this because you obviously don't have, you're not taking care of us. But that, it didn't come off like that at all. So I had the opportunity with Clouds Over California, among other subjects that are happening in the book, just to be able to bring a little bit of that in. And at the time that I did, I think it came quite naturally when Black Lives Matter was very prevalent and I was seeing it be demonized. People were saying all sorts of things that were like, well, that's not what they said, or that's not what they meant. That's like, I would see things with the media, and I knew that some kids were picking up on Black Lives Matter, and adults too. I knew adults thinking that Black Lives Matter were all sorts of things that they really weren't. And it's the same thing. It's the power of that spin. And so it seemed really timely. And again, happening all over again, it seemed timely to have that in the story.
Yeah, I love the idea of like really showing the whole story as opposed to the slice of propaganda that we get fed on. Because a lot of it's propaganda, it's a lot of it's a person of power telling you, villainizing the thing that actually, it's like where we are right now. It's like we're underpaid, where everything is expensive, and we're the problem. But they're selling us something. You're like, women's care is strong because of Black women. We're actually needing women's clinic and taking care of women and actually supporting them. It was, you're asking for basic needs that need to be met, and we're not meeting them. But the person of power tells us that you're the problem. You're the one who's struggling, right? So I love the story, and I'm excited to read Clouds of California now that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the next book to read. But I really want listeners to pick those books up. I think they're powerful books. I think they're books that you don't be discouraged by the middle grade and young adult. I think they're perfect for not only escape, but also to understand how we can actually be inspired to make an impact now.
No, thank you for saying that. One thing is because the writing is new to me to be actually out there and making books in this regard. And I think one thing that's been interesting to me is I'm just trying to write with my protagonists are young, but I'm writing like for kids, like writing young. You say, no, anyone can read it because anyone can. It might be that Stevie is 12, but it doesn't mean that the world and everything that's happening and the language and everything is like so talking down in any way or talking, you know what I mean? You can tell the story, and it's basically the rules are mostly that the protagonist is this age.
Yeah. And it's perfect. So, Karyn, thank you for writing these stories. I think they matter. And I think just keep writing. I know you're not, history was never your strong suit, but I am so glad that you found this niche and now you continue to share American history.
Thank
Need it. All right, let's talk about your books, like reading life. What kind of books do you tend to read?
It varies. So it varies for me. It's funny. Lately, I've been like a little into a thriller thing lately, maybe because of Blue Beach and this whole thing happened. I reread a book that I read a long time ago, and I don't know if I mentioned this one to you, but I was going to say, you ever hear the book Perfume?
No, please tell me all about it.
By Patrick Suskind. I read this back when it first came out, like the 80s, 90s or something, the 80s. I read it back when. And it's called Perfume, the Story of a Murderer.
Oh my gosh, I need to.
It's with an intense olfactory. Yeah. And I mean, he's a very strange person. But you follow it. And I reread it recently. I was dying to read it. And I reread it. And I loved it all over again. Because it really takes you deep into the world of this person. And they live through what they sense, everything that they smell, and they can smell everything, and they can discern what everything is everywhere, miles away, kind of thing. They're like beyond an animal, but this person has no real heart. This person isn't guided that way. They're guided from their own need. And so you watch him as he goes through the world, and he finds himself working for perfumeries in France to get closer to working with what it's so important for him to get the perfect smell and smells that mean so much to him, and that you can just sit and bask in that and be lost in it. And the writing is out of this world, the way it takes you into whether it's the most disgusting place or the most heavenly place. They do such a remarkable job and very specific. And I'm now reading it as a writer, I found myself just thinking, how do you keep coming up with more words to describe all of these things? I don't feel like you're reusing them. And it's throughout the whole book. It's so rich and such a sensory insane. I don't want to say overload because it's not too much. It's just great. But sensory, it's really very intense in that regard. And then it's also dark. It gets to where the things that are perfect scent involves a person and then another. And it becomes this kind of collection as need. And so I don't want to say too much more about it, but boy, is it intense. It's really good.
It sounds so good. It sounds so intense. And it's also like just puts into perspective the sense of self and like the way that actually can just remind you of memories or create new memories and create new space. There's a reason why we cannot have it. If you break up, if you had a perfume and you broke up with someone and that perfume, you cannot have that smell again because it just triggered that.
Right. Right. And it's that kind of thing where it's, you know how there are things where, I don't know if you smell things, it happens to me sometimes where I'll be like, oh my God, that's my childhood. That's like what it is. Was it a doll that I had? Was it like, oh, and it's so, some part of your body knows it so well.
Yeah.
So it does that kind of, it plays with you in that way. And like you said about being able to just lost in it, he's got that happening throughout. It's just really cool read. I loved rereading that. So the thriller, like that kind of thriller thing is really fun. Yeah, is really fun. I also read before that, I hadn't read Stephen King in forever. And I read Pet Sematary.
Woo.
Yeah, it was so good. You think of Stephen King and you think of the movies they've made of his stuff, and with the exception of The Shining and I don't know, maybe it. You think of some things. A lot of them kind of go south. They're just not as like it's such a clear example of the book must be much better. But it's not campy or anything. It deals a lot with mortality and asking deep questions about mortality and dealing with death. And so it's very intense. It also it does have the really scary elements in it. I remember reading Misery back when it first came out, and I threw it across the room. At one point, I just hurled it across the room, and I'm like, I'm not picking that thing up. And then I picked it up. And the second time I hurled it across the room, I didn't pick it up. My boyfriend at the time picked it up and dealt with it. I mean, I was like, I'm not touching it. That's just awful. He's awful. Yeah, he's gone too far for me. But I'm looking forward to getting into more of Stephen King. But I'll tell you another book can I tell you another book?
Yes, please.
A little different, but this is a book that I haven't read in a long time. I'm kind of tempted. I'm trying to let more time go by before I read. It's been a long time, but I just remember it so well. And they actually made a graphic novel of it that I looked at a lot of because I got it for my kids, hoping they'd get into it.
Yeah.
So I familiarized myself with it, which was Kindred by Octavia Butler. Did you ever read it?
I did actually.
Look,
It's a masterclass. I feel like Octavia Butler, it's a masterclass in writing. It's a required task, like to
he's incredible. And I just this feeling for anybody who doesn't know it of being because it takes place in the 1970s and the main character gets caught in a time travel thing. And so she goes back in time to the early 1800s and is in a horrible, perilous situation of saving a young boy from danger. And she comes back to Brooklyn to her, it's a Black woman, goes back to Brooklyn to her white boyfriend and is like, oh my gosh, this is insane what just happened. And then it keeps happening to her every time the boy in the 1800s is in serious trouble, about to die, doing something very dangerous. She's almost summoned to rescue him. And she ends up, but when she goes for what seems like just a little bit of time in her present time in the 70s, is actually years there, years spent there. Like you said, Octavia Butler is such a brilliant writer. What it does to take you into a place and really take you into a place that you can talk about and abstract all you want. But when you're a modern woman and you're being lifted and taken, transported, and you're of color, she's a Black woman and she's taken into this situation where she's now enslaved, it makes it really real for you suddenly. And when you're in the book, I mean, I really feel like you're living it. I think that's part of what gets me is you're not just reading a book about an enslaved person in the 1800s. You're reading about a modern woman who has a modern life and modern sensibilities, who's like you, who is then taken. So it's her in that situation. She can't forgive the things that are happening. She questions things. She knows her history that she's actually in. So that book really gets me.
I think that's another masterclass. If you haven't read it, I think you need to pick it up. I think you
Oh,
just need to
yeah.
pick up any of Octavia Butler's book. They really are. If you're looking for classics, like the idea, like these are books that are gonna not only educate you, but you're gonna see, like the writing is so powerful that it's
Yeah,
just gonna take your breath away.
absolutely. And I'm not a sci-fi, I'm not a
No,
sci-fi person,
no,
but I got lost in there. And I'm not a horror person per se,
yeah.
but I can read like the books that I told you. So it's so funny with certain genre, I look at it and go, it's not going to be for me. But then I find myself just completely diving deep down. So who knows?
I
Maybe I'll be reading that. What's the Thorns? What's the book, the romance book that everyone's like insane?
Thorns and Roses to fantasy. Okay, so that one you have to read the first one. It's a little tough around the edges, but then the second one picks up.
What's
So
the first one?
the first one's a Court and Thorns and Roses.
Okay. What's
So
the, that's why.
and then the story shifts around, and then you get a Court of Mr. Fury. So it's like a trilogy, and you just need to have them right away because they're just kind of like you. The story makes sense, but the first one is like the first half is a little bit slow because she's just painting. She's not doing much. She's just like they pull her out for her life and to be in a beautiful cage, and
Okay.
then the story picks up waypoint. I read that 10 years ago, so I think that's how I remember. But as someone who like I'm also too, I thought in her like horror, and I was like, horror is not for me. I'm the scary cat. And I just read a horror about female rage, about perimenopause, like basically like women going to perimenopause and then turning as a werewolf. And I was like, as someone who just like thought, but
Look what they made. That's not the one that Amy Adams did. They did a
I
movie
don't
of.
think so. I
Maybe
don't.
they
It's
stole
a
it.
new book. It just came
Oh,
out today, but it's actually like it's called Feral. But it's basically the way it was pitched. It was like female rage, perimenopause, and I was like, "Well, I'm going to perimenopause. Let's just see."
oh,
And I
that's
was like, "Oh my gosh, I can read horror." So I'm
yeah.
like, and I've read some Stephen King, but I'm like, maybe I can go back to it as someone who didn't think I would like that kind of genre. Let me give it a try.
Yeah, you can. There's a book called, I hate even telling people this one because I don't want people to judge me.
We do not judge here.
One called A Certain Hunger.
What is
It's so good.
okay?
But
I'm gonna pick it up. So, can you give
it's,
us a little teaser? What is it about?
well, okay. I'm not gonna label the thing. I'm just gonna say that there's this woman. It's very dry, very funny. And I believe she's a food critic, or she was a food critic. And so she's a real foodie, and she can cook really well as well. But she's also really witty and smart. And she has a little bit of an insatiable sexual appetite too. So she's got these lovers and she meets men, and she ends up killing people.
Oh, I love this. Yay!
And then, and then preparing interest.
Yeah, like prepare some food. It is actually, as someone who likes a little bit like I like romance, but I also like the husband did it and killed the man and all that stuff. I am right there for you. I'm like, yeah, this is like you just gave me the Venn diagram of an ideal boat boyfriend.
Well, you got to read it. I would be in the kitchen cooking, laughing, because I listened to a lot of it. I read it and listened to it. And I would be listening to it in the kitchen and just laughing my butt off. I was like, she's really dry,
Yes.
really funny, but it's the C word, just cannibalism in there.
At this point, what are we asking for?
I don't know.
You're like, let us eat them.
Yeah, that's it. When in the context of it, it's not insane. But it's not as insane. But it's definitely, it's funny because I was in the local bookstore, and it came up with one of the women that worked at the bookstore, and she had read it too. And we just started geeking out because we were both like, oh my God, it's so good. Talking about, we're afraid to tell people that it's a cannibal. But if you read it, you'll understand.
Oh, I'm gonna read it. Like I appreciate this recommendation so much. All right, Karyn, tell us where we can find you online.
Oh, I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter anymore. Too much of a beehive. Every time it's like you open up Twitter and I feel like it was like,
that's much. Twitter is just, it's dead. It's unfortunately,
okay.
It has died.
Okay. I'm on Instagram mostly. I'm like Karyn-Parsons .com. I also have a website. But you can find also Sweet Blackberry. I'd love it if people checked out sweetblackberry.org. Sweet Blackberry is on Facebook, Instagram as well. And we have the sweetblackberry.org website. Visit it and check out all the great things that we're doing. And if you're a teacher, don't hold it against me that I like the book about cannibals.
No, we do not judge. We read everything. We're omnivores about reading everything, and we do not judge. This is a place, this is a safe space. I've been talking about romance, and when romance was not good, like people didn't like it. It doesn't really matter. We just don't judge. People read whatever they want to read, and that's the point. We just want to read it.
I love that. I love that. Well, like I said, if there's any teachers or anybody who I visit schools across the country, and so if you visit sweetblackberry.org, you might be interested in what we're doing and what we bring to your school too, as well as you can see the books that if you go to KarynParsons.com, you can see my books and everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Karyn, for being on the show.
This was fun talking to you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the What to Read Next. For more book lists, cozy reads, and library tips, visit the whattoreadnextblog.com. Your next great read might be waiting there.